Hi,
Hi.
everyone. That was
Are
a
we
great
are we live?
beginning. We are live.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
hi, everyone. Sorry about that fantastic beginning. My name's Ann Continelli. I am the in-house media producer here at the Coolidge Corner Theatre, and I am very thrilled to have John Hodgman with me tonight. We all know John Hodgman. He's a marvelous author, comedian, actor. He has a terrific podcast. Um, uh, Judge John Hodgman, and just the but he's here today because he is a fan of the film, the documentary Grey Gardens, as am I, and he's going to talk to us about that. So, hi, John.
Hi, Ann. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are
Okay,
you?
okay as possible given the times.
Yes, yes, yeah.
First of all, I apologize for naming my podcast Judge John Hodgman. It's impossible to say.
It
I can never say it myself, but it's true. I have a podcast called Judge John Hodgman. I am a fan of the movie Grey Gardens. But even more than that, I am a fan of the Coolidge Corner Theater. It's still hard for me to call it the Coolidge Corner Theater because, of course, when I was coming up, it was the Coolidge Corner Movie House. You can see it behind me in the Zoom now.
Yeah.
This is what the marquee was like when I worked here starting in 1989 when I was a high school senior at Brookline High School. And then I worked there on and off summers during college through 1994, I would say. Although it was to the point when this iteration of the Coolidge closed for a period of time before the current foundation bought it and reopened it as a not-for-profit. At the time, the Coolidge was a arguably for-profit enterprise that showed I think you can, I'm not sure if this is the marquee, it has the second animation celebration, big moneymaker there. Maybe they're showing in this marquee the General, a lot of, where I first saw all the Buster Keaton movies, where I first saw all the Marx Brothers movies. I still have my t-shirt from the time featuring Toshiro Mifune from, not Zatoichi the Blind Swordsman, but Seven Samurai, all the Akira Kurosawa films. And then by the time I started working there, it was more of the kind of art house movie theater that it is now, I should say. And of course, Anne, this was scheduled weeks and weeks ago when the only thing that we were preoccupied with as a nation was this international pandemic. Obviously, we're now in the midst of an equally compelling crisis of national conscience. Today was the final laying to rest of George Floyd in Houston. I believe that there's still a vigil in Boston that is going on. So I don't mean to counter program all of the action and protest that has been going on, rightfully, in my opinion, particularly with a discussion about a movie of two upper class white ladies where the only person of color is the gardener. Interesting look. But I think we'll find a way to connect this incredible movie to some of the conversations that we're having nowadays about the patriarchy. And of course, it's just a masterpiece of documentary cinema and a piece of popular, a really interesting piece of popular culture that is always, in my mind, worthy of discussion. Because as we were saying off screen, or maybe when we were struggling to get this going, like I could turn this movie on any day of the week and watch it all the way through. It's utterly captivating, and I hope that we'll have a good time talking about it. But one thing I didn't want to do, also, by the way, of course, it was directed by David and Albert Maysles, who are hometown Brookline people. And so it seemed like a great topic to talk about when the Coolidge asked me to do this long ago. But I had noticed, Anne, that you had already picked it as your staff pick. So I didn't want to horn in on your pick, and I wanted to have this conversation with you. So may I start by saying why is it your pick?
Oh my gosh, where do I begin? Well, I think it's too simplistic to say that I'm fascinated with the beauty of um, decay and destruction. That sounds morbid, but it's not. The beautiful thing about this film is you have this story of these people who are slowly deteriorating, and the scenery around them is slowly deteriorating. So it's this terrific piece of art that just happened naturally. And fortunately, the Maisels were brilliant enough to notice that and to recognize it and to say, this needs to be recorded. I reviewed Roger Ebert's review of this
Oh,
before.
cool.
I love Roger. Who doesn't love Roger Ebert and his
Right.
insights into everything? And it was the one thing that he said that really struck me was, yes, these women are deteriorating in many ways, but they're still, you can see the beauty of their youth. They're still
Yes.
witty. They're still charming in a way. So you can,
Oh, yeah.
you can really see that, while at the same time see the sadness, the pathos, all of that sort of stuff. So now, what about you? What is it that, because no one's here to hear me talk. They're here to hear you talk. So
No, you're to hear us talk. I guess I like the lighting, the end. No, I don't. I mean, it is, I apologize because it is something of an impossible question to pose because there's so many layers to enjoy, I guess is the word.
Yeah.
But to explore. I first saw it when I was in college taking a class on documentary filmmaking, and it riveted me. I think because it can be appreciated on a formal layer. I mean, the way this is obviously an example of a very specific type of, at the time, very new documentary making, cinema verite, which was to have no narration,
Right.
to not only make it as naturalistic as possible, but of course what the Maisels did, which other documentaries didn't do, was admit their complicity in the making of the documentary. They are a part of the documentary. It is not a reaction that they are observing, to
Right.
use a scientific term, but it's a reaction that they are affecting by being there, which you see so bittersweetly in little Edie's awaken to life and real love affair with alternately David and Albert Maisels as she attempts to, she pitches woo. I don't think she really thinks, or who knows what her thought of the outcome might be, but she is flirting with them, and it is exciting to her that they are there.
She absolutely is. In fact, I found online, I was so fascinated also with what happened to her after the film. And it's really beautiful because she actually did get to finally perform live. There was a club in, I believe, Greenwich Village that had her do live shows, and and there are some photos that you can find online of her on stage, and the smile, and she's just thrilled it finally happened. But there is a phone call that she made to, was it Albert or David? I don't remember, where she says, I should have married you back then, which I found really fascinating because.
Right. Well, yeah, that's interesting.
Because did she think that, did she honestly think that that was a possibility? Did she honestly think that if all she had to do was say yes and they would have rushed to marry her? And could that be part of this illusion that, there's a sort of daydream quality about her whole life?
Right. I mean, and this is a conversation that I recall having in the class when I saw the film now. Let's see, I must have been a junior in college, so that would have been 2-3 years ago. I'm very young. I saw it on VHS over and over again to date me.
Yeah.
But it is a complicated thing to watch this movie because one wonders. I mean, they live in a world of their own, in total social isolation. before it was fashionable. They have obviously constructed various mythologies about their respective pasts. To what degree they are rooted in truth or fantasy, it's unclear. You know, there are multiple references that little Edie should have married John Paul Getty or one of the Getty heirs.
Right. Yeah.
But when I looked up on Wikipedia, it's like there's no evidence to support that she met him but once, you know.
Right.
And let's face it, I mean, little Edie has alopecia universalis. She has no hair on her body. It's never discussed. It's never explained why. Her perception of time and the universe is eccentric, to say the least. So there is a question like, are the Maisels, you know, why are they in this position? Why have they been abandoned by their wealthy family, it would seem? And is it okay to be filming people who might be experiencing some form of delusion or mental illness? I can't diagnose that stuff. I'm not a psychiatrist, you know what I mean? But
Right.
there is this gentle, like, they are charming. The Maisels enjoy being there. There's a reason that Jerry, the marble fawn, comes back every day. You know, he likes hanging out with them. They have this incredible verve about them that makes you think about what and who they might have been had they not been both so profoundly abandoned by their families, and particularly the men in their lives. And it's a question mark as to how much of what little Edie perceives is a self-consoling fantasy and how much is true. I don't think that David or Albert Maisels was ever going to marry little Edie.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think she sensed that there was a spark, like they were into her and she was into them.
Right, which leads also into, she definitely strikes me as the type of person who takes a spark and in her head, she goes through the whole relationship. You know, when I have a fight with my boyfriend, there are times where I will say, we really need to talk now because I have been fighting with you in my head for 3 days and you're not doing very well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, it's a tendency we all have to just sort of take things a little too far in our head, but I feel like that was her whole life, you know.
Well, I remember, you know, when I first dug into it again and again, you know, a couple of the lines that really stuck out, and the one that really stuck with me the deepest is little Edie turning to the camera after describing, you know, her revolutionary costume for the day. Like, it's really, you know, like, I'm going to wear this, this drape for a cape and this blanket or towel for a hat or a shawl, pantyhose over the waist, over the sweater or whatever. And then she just breaks for a moment, looks at the head of the camera, she goes, I have to make this stuff up. Like, this self-awareness that there's something off about the way she's presenting to the world, but she has no choice. She has to make it up. And the fact is that whatever went sideways in their lives, in 1952, when little Edie returned to Grey Gardens to live with her mother, Big Edie, you know, Big Edie had already been abandoned by her husband and left nothing. Little Edie had gone to New York and met with some calamity or failure that she had to be sent home. And from then on, they were stuck together in that house and they made up a world. They had to make it up because everything that they had been trained to expect from life as women in the social circle they were in had fallen apart, and they had to make a world up.
Yes, we have a great question that came in, not to interrupt you, but
no, I was just, please.
And it's so funny because I was actually going to bring this up, and then we have a question
scooped.
that says, yeah, exactly. Can we talk about how fiercely loyal little Edie was to Big Edie? Her mother's reputation was always foremost on her mind, yet she was encased by this woman as well. It's a great question.
Yeah.
Because there was, in my opinion, there is genuine love there, and there's also genuine resentment.
Of
And
course.
and the two just coexist in this it's fascinating to me. I don't know if you want to answer the question. How can we talk about how fiercely loyal little Edie was to Big Edie? Her mother's reputation was always foremost on her mind.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is we were talking a little bit before about how the Maisels were initially hired by Lee Radziwill to document the Bouvier family. And the Maisels were like, okay, we'll take your Kennedy money or whatever. And they're like, this rich family is boring. This rich functional power family is boring. We're interested in these two poor relations who are living in this dilapidated mansion that you don't want anyone to think or talk about because they're embarrassing. And it was just their eye for like, this is a real story. And it wasn't merely that they were eccentric. It was also because they were profoundly relatable. We have these relationships with our own mothers, fathers, closest partners, closest, people in our lives. If you are in your lives that tightly for that long a period of time, of course, you're going to do this circle of recrimination and defense and recrimination and defense. To some degree, I think that little Edie's defense of her mother is a defense of her upbringing and her breeding and the social status that she had, that her mother was robbed and therefore little Edie suffered. And therefore it was important to be clear that Big Edie was a big star and an important figure. But then there's this heartbreaking line at the end after their many fights and clearly, unresolved anger with each other.
Yeah.
Where little Edie says, I think it's off camera, she just goes, I bet I should go check on Mother and the cats. She's a lot of fun. I hope she doesn't die. Like, wow. They shot 70 hours of footage to make this film.
Yeah.
And what you see, I mean, just from a formal point of view of the shots that they find, of the reflections of a person in the mirror when someone is talking about them.
Oh, I know.
And then obviously the choices they made of what to include. It's
just
incredible.
Brilliant. I know. So here's something that's not necessarily a rave review, so that'll be interesting to talk about. From Kay Holiday. I struggle with Grey Gardens because I think it's brilliant, but as cinema verite, it doesn't really lead anywhere. It meanders and just ends, which is why I love the Documentary Now conclusion. The Documentary Now one was just hilarious. It's truly a brilliant movie, but it's designed to just be their lives. That's interesting. It's an interesting, yes, I agree that it doesn't really, it just meanders and then ends, but I would answer that's kind of life, right? I mean, what's that saying? This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. Like, it's
T.S. Eliot.
Yeah, is that who it was? T.S. Eliot?
Yeah, and then I can't remember my Brookline High School valedictorian speaker, but that was his way he closed his speech too. Anyway, Paul. Yeah. Anyway, I can't remember. Yeah, no, I mean, the thing about Verite was that it was trying to be under narrated. And, there is documentary that exists to be activist and to make a point. But I think that you're right, Anne, that their intention was to capture the drift of their lives as truthfully as possible, without trying to overwrite a lot of this is what it means. Right. And to me, that's what makes it so revisitable. I do think that they're making choices, right? They had 70 hours of footage. They chose 2 hours to show. And the choices are subtle, but there is a reason that the movie closes on that line. She's by little Edie about her mother. She's a lot of fun. I hope she doesn't die. And then it's Big Edie upstairs alone in bed, on that unmade bed with the cat, singing to herself.
Yeah.
and little Edie downstairs in that foyer dancing alone. It is saying that this is going to end. And in fact, it did. I mean, within 2 years of its release, Big Edie had passed away. And by
Right.
1979, Little Edie had sold the house to Sally Quinn. So I think that there is a little bit of a hand of, we're capturing this moment, but the moment is going to end. But I think it's more just, as you say, the drift of life. It is the drift of life that they're exploring. And that's, to me, it makes it interesting.
Yeah, very few people have, the end of their life be this nice little wrapped up thing. Most of us, it just, that's that. And I love that. I love I love the choices they made to end that. Very much.
Yeah.
Let's see if there are any other questions coming in.
And I think, to their credit, it's subtle to the point that it is very easy to miss. I mean, I've seen this movie probably 9 or 10 times, and I never caught that whiff of Big Edie's mortality is imminent until last night when I rewatched it to talk to you.
Yeah.
It is very subtle, and it can be. I mean, it opens with a kind of huge bang of, look at these incredibly specific and eccentric characters and their fights and their means of speaking and the mystery show of trying to figure out what happened in their past. But then it just kind of lags there for that middle chunk. You're just living with them. And there is a moment of like, yeah, it's time for me to go, like that birthday party they have for Big Edie. Like, yeah, we got to go now. We got to go return the world.
Right. There are a couple more really good questions that came in.
Great.
I really love this one from Joan Arkham. Do you think?
Oh, I know Joan. I
Really?
do. Hi, Joan. Yeah. Joan is a regular on my my occasional daytime talk show where I interview cats and dogs on Instagram. Get your pets.
I also would like to ask you what you think you would have asked those cats, but we can get to that another time.
Yeah, sure.
So Joan says, do you think they were prisoners of their class? Being eccentric was better than just being poor or actually admitting they needed help? That's a great question.
I think so too. And one of the things that really, it really struck me. I don't. There is an older woman in my extended family that I know, who I've known for years and years and years, and in a similar way, was brought up in a kind of society family at a time and in a social class where the expectation was you would get an education, but then you would get married, and then you would do nothing.
Right.
And that is exactly what both Edies expected to happen to them. And in fact, they thought of as a kind of prison too, right? I think they were both comfortable with with a certain level of financial security, but neither of them, part of the reason that they're where they are is that neither of them were really comfortable with the idea of just getting an MRS degree, settling down and raising children. Both of them had artistic ambitions, active artistic ambitions that were being, dissuaded in them, right? So the abandonment by them, by Big Edie's husband and Little Edie's father, was catastrophic in terms of their financial security, and obviously very, very damaging to their understanding of what the world was going to be for them. But in a weird way, they lived a life of high drama, imprisoned in this mansion where they answered to no man.
Yeah,
right?
that's a really interesting point. I mean, in a way, they decided it was almost better to be poor because they knew they were poor, that by not following this societal expectation. And at one point, I think Big Edie even says that Little Edie didn't want to get married.
Yeah.
Now I have to watch the movie again because I'm almost positive that she
Yeah.
said at some point that she didn't want to get married. So they are almost willing to give up. Okay, they're not going to be wealthy. The stipend that she's receiving from her ex-husband is not a lot, but they're going to be free. And they're, yeah,
Yeah.
and so in a way it is, that's very true. It's a very
That, I mean, I think that that's what that's what people who love the movie react to, which is that there's a lot of complicated stuff. There's a lot of moral ambiguity about whether it's right to be filming people who may or may not be, diagnosable with a mental illness or a delusional disorder or whatever it is. But they are icons in their minds and in that house. And there is a certain I don't want to say redemption because she didn't do anything wrong, but this excitement that little Edie got her time on stage finally, via this. So
right.
yeah.
There's another question from Doug Nurl.
But to answer Joan, sorry, Doug, but to speak with one more thing to Joan's thing, which is
Sure.
like they were. I'm not sure it would be interesting to see how their lives might have unfolded if they had not had the expectations of their high society social class burdened on them and then taken away from them. And equally, I often think, if there's something going on with little Edie, if she has some form of bipolar or another mental illness, what would have happened if she married? Would she have been put in a sanatorium? Would she have been hidden away? Would she have been forced to just do social affairs? I don't know. All of the protective structure, they were of their class. They had suffered the expectations of their class, but all of the patriarchal protective structure of their class had been taken away from them. Right. And that's the ruins that they're living in. So
yeah, and I'm also fascinated by the empathy that they have, the fact that they take in all of these cats. I really see these women who at times can appear very selfish and self-centered, and then at other times they're feeding how many cats and raccoons, and they don't have the heart to to call someone in to exterminate because there are raccoons living in their walls now.
Yeah. Yes.
And that really touched me. It was really like they, you get to see this whole empathetic side to them as well. Hold on, I'm gonna have another question. Let's see.
Doug, we had someone from Douglas or something.
Right, Doug. I know someone whose criticism was that if these were not well-connected, were formerly well-connected women, but eccentric poor women, no one would have tuned in. I'm certain that, well, we know the history of this, right? We were talking about it before we went live, that the Maisels were actually making a film about Jackie Bouvier Kennedy's family. So they were making a film about that, and they actually found it to be not very interesting, but the only interesting aspect was this cousin and aunt who were really fascinating, and that's how the whole thing started. Right. So yeah, do you think that, let's say they were truly poor, they didn't have any connections, do you think anyone would have cared enough?
I mean, I appreciate the sort of dagger in Douglas's question in that, it's part of the energy of the film is the fact that these two white women from an affluent background are living in this haunted mansion,
right,
and have fallen from grace, or at least fallen from their station. That's part of the energy of what's happening. So I don't know that it is. I mean, I appreciate the critique that. I mean, I guess the argument been made. There are probably weird mothers and daughters living together in all kinds of social situations. We could be documenting mentally ill people in in poverty, and no one would watch because. And it's like, yeah, you have a point. I mean, the
Right.
part of the oomph of the film in its exploration of class is the fact that they come from a particular social class and they are not. They live in this netherworld.
Right.
Because the truth is, they do own that property, right? Which is not something that they are the benefit of the white privilege, which is they come from a family that owns a lot of property, generational wealth that they could effectively fall back on if they wanted to sell that house. But at the same time, they don't have any income. So they are living in poverty within inherited wealth. So it's all of these contradictions, I think, do make this interesting. But
Yeah.
it's not as though the Maisels sat down and said, let's find a documentary that people will watch. We got to get 2 white women. That's not what was going on. I mean, that's not how good documentaries come.
Right.
And
it's also,
right.
I mean, I think that when when I think of archaeological ruins, if you ever go to, Greece or whatever, and you actually see what was once a tremendous affluent structure, and that in its heyday, it was just so fantastic. And you can see it. That's the thing about ruin that's fascinating, is you can still see the shadow of what it was, but you now also see the decay and what it is now. I think that fascination that we have with archaeological ruin of great palaces or great amphitheaters, it's the same thing here. It's the fact that they were once high society and now live in squalor that is intriguing to humans.
This is not a celebration of, and this film is not a celebration of high society or white wealth. It is an indictment of patriarchy, in my opinion. Neither David nor Albert are still alive to comment on it, but I think cinema verite is about capturing the lives of real people, and they were drawn to certain things, whether it was Altamont or their documentary salesman or whatever. They were drawn to finding interesting people who would otherwise not ever be documented.
Exactly.
And it's not as though the world was demanding a Grey Gardens documentary. No one was commissioning them to film these 2 people, and if they hadn't, we wouldn't know who they were.
Right.
So
just a couple things I have to check with you. It's already, I think, 8:35. You said you were fine going a little long.
Yeah, I'll do this all night long. I'm not really, but it's like.
We have a couple more questions, so at least let's go through those. This is a very interesting one from, I think maybe it's pronounced Davin, D-A-V-I-N. Since you've seen this movie in different parts of your life, what do you think you notice more now than back in college when you saw it for the first time?
Well, I used to have all the dance moves down, and I can't do it anymore. I just don't have, I'm not limber. I would say the thing that I noticed this time, and I don't know whether to put it on this time of my life or what, I think it might have more to do, this is a movie about social isolation. While they live in a very specific situation, I think that anyone who has, and I guess we're about, my wife and I are, in a few years, we'll be empty nesters and we'll be alone at home. Anyone who has parents who've been living alone at home together for a long time, how weird it gets. Like when you are isolated from the world, strange habits get enhanced. There's a certain amount of giving up on different chores that felt important at one point or another. Eccentricities and idiosyncrasies get heightened. When you are isolated from the world, and this is the danger of being isolated. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's fine for me to wear pajamas every day. Why should I'm not going to an office anymore. It doesn't matter. You know, maybe I should have vodka at 10 a.m. rather than 6 p.m. or whatever. Who's there to stop you? When you are all alone in a house, whether all alone or with another person, you stop noticing, you know, we all have a certain blindness to clutter in our homes. And that's when no one is in there sort of spot checking you going, hey, you know, there's a pile of raccoon feces in the corner. That's when you realize, oh, that's not good. I got to clean that up, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that, not to draw too much of a parallel, but it's something like, I think we all get into our little Grey Gardensy worlds, particularly now that we're all stuck at home, and kind of like are rethinking about what what the contours of our daily lives are. Not all of us are stuck at home. Of course, essential workers are out there doing it and killing it every day. So, or, you know, but I think it's also, it's an indictment of a kind of complacency. When we don't look around, we don't have an outside force coming in to make us straighten up, dress up, notice the pile of raccoon feces, things just get worse and worse and worse. And I think that one of the things that's happening in the big picture right now is that essentially, you know, a global documentary crew of people with phones in their hands are showing us there's a lot of shit and we need to pay attention. So that's
Right.
what I've noticed this time. Like that's why we got to get out of the house. We got to get the vaccine.
Yeah.
We got to get out of the house in every possible way and see each other and deal with each other and not get too stuck into our isolated bubbles. But there you go.
That's very true. All right, I have one more question from our viewers. So from Lorraine, this is, of course, a question we all have. It has to deal with Little Edie's speech. It says, I know there's something called an upper class way of speaking, but Little Edie has a very Australian sounding accent, which
Oh, hi.
Edie does not. Yeah, thoughts.
Little Edie's, there was a time when I could do a pretty good Little Edie, but I'm not going to try to do it now because ultimately I feel it's a little bit disrespectful. But she does have a very strange, it's an iteration of the upper class New England, New York, mid-Atlantic posh accent that I've never heard anyone else speak in.
Yeah.
And it is distinct from, you know, there is that Kennedy accent, which is kind of no other family has it. And there's elements of that in it. I've got to find that Libra man. That's the one I always think about too. Yeah, I'm not a dialectician, so I don't know.
Well, I don't think
where it
anyone
comes from,
knows.
but
I mean, you know, I have been discussing this film for years with all kinds of people, and no one really knows. That's the big mystery: is where did Little Edie's accent come from?
I
And
think
there's no answer to it. I mean, I do think
it might have something to do with speaking alone, speaking out loud for 20 years in a house that has 20 rooms, but only one other occupant. And you just, you know, and she's theatrical.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it may be a very specific Grey Gardens house accent, you know. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, we know that she did, you know, try for a career in dancing and acting. She must have taken some theater courses. And so she probably learned, you know, proper theatrical enunciation and all that sort of stuff. And that, I feel like it's just this meld of all happened in her life that just,
that's a really interesting way of putting it. Yes,
came together to create this unique way of speaking, and that is who she is. And let me see if there are any more questions. I think that was the last question. So
great.
We can wrap it up. I do want to say before we wrap it up, the one thing that you, I, and is it David? I think it's David. We all worked in the box office at the Coolidge.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
when did you work there when there was a real box office?
I worked there. Let's see, back in 2000, I was hired as a box office employee, and then
Right.
later I became the in-house media producer. But yeah, so it was
Fantastic.
2005 for me. I can't believe that you worked there during the entire 1989 thing. We really have to connect over this. The whole story of what happened to the Coolidge. I've been
Oh, yeah, yeah,
telling
yeah.
that story. I made a 40-minute documentary about it. I would have interviewed you for the documentary if I had known that you had
Oh,
anything to do with, and it's still in progress. So we really do need to talk about this, because
well,
I didn't know
you're
you knew
welcome to
David
come to my
Kleider.
you're welcome to come to my dilapidated mansion and follow me around for 70 hours while I spout all kinds of half reminiscences about the Coolidge. But
Well,
yeah.
you knew David Kleider, though.
Well, Kleiler, I was pre-Kleiler. I knew
Right.
David. Yeah. I mean, I was there when Justin owned it. I was working with Harry Snyder, Harry Friedman, and back when the lobby opened onto Harvard Street rather than to the alley.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that's
there was a
amazing.
standalone box office and
Yeah,
everything else. Yeah,
amazing.
it was the best job I ever had. You can read all about my experience of it in my book Medallion Status, available at
Yes.
Brookline Booksmith across the street. They've just restarted their online ordering, pickup, and delivery service. But yeah, no, I'd love to talk more about the Coolidge, and
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
it's one
that's
of the most
amazing.
important places in my life. And I hope that people watching, if you're not familiar with it, check out is it thecoolidge.org?
It's just Coolidge.org.
Coolidge.org, because during this time, obviously they're closed, but they're hosting not merely gab sessions with me, but I don't know whether you've already done it or you had the discussion with Willem Dafoe recently. You're
That was
hosting all
just the
kinds of
other night. Yep.
really interesting virtual screenings of interesting films.
Yeah.
It's a really special place. And obviously, this is not how we want people to experience the Coolidge, by going into it, because it's such a beautiful theater, but in an odd way, more people have a chance to experience the Coolidge than ever before, because no one can go into it. So we can only come to it virtually. It's just been a real pleasure and honor to talk to you about this movie.
It's been a real pleasure to talk to you about this movie. And
Yeah,
thank you so much for doing this. I just want to
thank
remind
you.
everyone to please support the Coolidge if you can. As John said, you can do some streaming on live on our site. We do get a percentage of that. And of course, memberships and donations and just giving us love on social media also is fantastic. So thank you so much for being with us tonight,
Thank you
John.
very much.
Really appreciate it.
And remember, everybody, Black Lives Matter. And there's a list that I circulate of places you can go to support direct action during this time around that issue, which is it's a Rolling Stone magazine list of resources that I thought was great. And I did a little hyperlink to it, which is bit.ly/get your friends, all in capital letters, get your friends. So I'll just leave with that.
Excellent. Thank you.